and most successful companies share one thing: they develop their people. The Success Launch Point makes it simple with on-demand courses, live coaching, and a thriving professional community. Your team will gain confidence, sharpen skills, and deliver more value, while staying loyal to the company that invests in them. To take your workforce to the next level, check out modernobserver.com/launchpoint.
Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase, the podcast that helps you succeed in your business, life, and career. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, with the Modern Observer Group, and with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Eric?
Doing fantastic. I can't believe it's almost November already, and we are having some very un-November-like weather lately.
No, it's been crazy. It's either 80 degrees or rainy or whatever, and we should have like the theme song in the background saying "The Falling Leaves" because that's what's happening after all the wind and weather the last couple of days.
Well, we had over the course of a week, without exaggeration, the temperature go from 80 to 30 and back to 60s. So, it's
And that's
been,
outside.
yes, and it's been a little crazy.
Yeah, but hey, that's the way it is around here. And not this weekend, but next weekend, we're actually turning the clocks back again. So everybody gets an extra hour of sleep.
Right, it's time to say goodbye to daylight savings time, and I'm sure the debate will come up over whether or not we should keep daylight savings time. I think we should keep daylight savings and get rid of switching it back. This way we get a little more light in the morning and in the evening. Right. So we have a special guest this week. With us is Meghan Blanchette. Meghan is a speaker and a personal growth expert. So, Meghan, why don't you introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Hi, Eric and Chip. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Meghan Blanchette, like you just said, and I am the founder of Fiercely Meghan LLC. This is a business that I started pretty recently, even though I've been doing the work for some time in other areas of my life. I decided to really make a go of it in 2025 and launched the LLC. So like you said, I'm a speaker, I am a coach, I am a retreat facilitator, and my work centers on emotional intelligence.
Fantastic. So, of course, with a name like that, I have to ask, what makes Meghan so fierce?
So, it's a funny story. When I am a hairstylist by trade, I have been a hairstylist for 21 years now. And I worked for a salon. The salon has long closed down now, but I worked for a salon when I lived in Florida for a few years called Fiercely Posh Hair Designs. And when I did that is when I created my first Gmail. This was years ago. And so I made the Gmail address fiercelymegan@gmail.com. So, I have a mentor in my speaking business. She is a wonderful woman who's owned a speaker bureau for about 40 years in Connecticut. She's retired now. But when we were trying to think of names for the business, we were emailing back and forth, and she was like, "Fiercely Meghan is actually perfect." So that's what I decided to go with. It really aligns with my messaging and honoring myself, honoring my boundaries, and, being authentically me. And hoping that that's what my clients and the people who hear me speak will get as well. So it just kind of lined up perfectly.
Nice. So, tell us a little bit about what you speak about.
So I am a person in long-term recovery from drugs and alcohol. And that is part of my story, but it ties in very deeply to the work that I do. So as a result of being a person in long-term recovery, I have done a lot of work on myself, deep work on my the things that make me tick, on the triggers that I have, on healing from past trauma and all of those things, and just really being able to show up as the best version of myself that I can be. And that work became available to me as a result of being in recovery. I am in a 12-step program, but I dive really deeply into therapy, and I want this kind of healing and work to be available to anybody who wants it, because I had no idea that it was even available until I went into recovery.
Then what kind of services do you offer your clients? I mean, how did those services grow out of your own experience?
Absolutely. So well, speaking is the first thing that I do, and the thing that um the business is really centered on. I My story is a moving story because of my time in active addiction and sort of where I was to where I am now, but also implementing the tools that I have learned throughout my journey, and what's possible for people, right? So that's what happens with the speaking. But from that speaking, if people want to continue to do work with me, that's where the coaching comes in. And we start by taking an inventory. What are you afraid of? What are you really good at? What is an opportunity for you that you think you could be better at? Are there any resentments or things that you're holding on to, whether that be against a person or an institution, or an experience that you've had where you just, if you feel like that may be the thing that's holding you back, or that may be the thing that has harmed you in some way. And when we start there, then we have a great place to start, and we can move into taking responsibility, taking accountability, setting healthy boundaries, and just moving into being a person who owns their power, doesn't give it away to anybody else. And that's where the work lives.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm big on accountability and ownership. In fact, just a few weeks ago, our listeners will remember we did a podcast on that topic. So it is really important. But let's face it, when somebody prior to getting into recovery is looking at themselves, their first thought tends to be to blame someone or something on their situation. So,
Absolutely.
how do you work with that?
Absolutely, and that was me. Before I did this work on myself, and before I really did this soul searching, I was a person that blamed my circumstances. I blamed everything other than me. I would not take accountability for where I was and what was going on, and it was always the fault of something or someone else. And because I have that experience, it enables me to walk somebody else through shifting out of that mindset and shifting into an accountability mindset. What I have learned is that I am responsible for my actions and my reactions. Everything else is out of my control. And the biggest thing is acceptance, accepting everything and everyone else for exactly who they are and what they are, and adapting my behavior accordingly so that I can still succeed, or I can still, um, you know, do what I want to do in this life, and I can still find peace.
Yeah, I notice you have a lot of your website is very thorough as far as listing your credentials and everything else that you're doing and so on. But obviously, you're giving back in a number of ways to a number of organizations. And I saw at the top of the list is you're the chairwoman of the Intercommunity Healthcare Board of Directors, and you've been serving that for 9 years. So tell us a little bit about that, and then the other philanthropic things that you're doing too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chip. I have been on the board of directors at Intercommunity, which is a nonprofit healthcare organization in East Hartford. And they have facilities in Hartford, East Hartford, and Glastonbury, and South Windsor. So they do offer addiction services, primary care services, and mental health services. When I got sober in Hartford in 2015, and I was actually in the intercommunity programs at that time. So I went to an inpatient rehab facility in Hartford at Mount Sinai. Then I went to a step down program also at Mount Sinai called Intermediate. That was 90 days. And then I went to their halfway house in Glastonbury called Clayton House. When I was at the halfway house in Glastonbury, that is a 6-month program. And the ways that, I mean, Clayton House was incredible. They taught me how to, we lived in a house of 15. So it was, living with everybody else's personalities. They taught me how to cook a meal for 16 people. I had no idea how to do that. I was 30 years old and I didn't know how to be an adult. They taught me how to have a bank account. I saved for my first car that I bought myself when I was living in Clayton House. So I started working at a local barber shop when I was living there because one requirement of that facility is that you have to have a job. So when I was working at this barber shop, I remember this man came in for a haircut one day and I recognized him. He dropped off sandwiches once a month at the halfway house. So I mentioned to him, like, hey, I recognize you from Clayton House. And it turns out that was Tyler Booth. He is the COO of Intercommunity. And he was dropping off sandwiches after their board meetings once a month. Um, and he was impressed with me, he says, because of my marketing skills. I think I sold him like a styling product for him, a styling product for his son. I upgraded his service. And we just had a really great conversation that day. So I found out shortly after that he nominated me for the board. And there was definitely imposter syndrome in that moment because I said, why on earth would you want me to be on the board of directors of anything? That sounds crazy. And he said, we need a voice for the clients. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have accountants, we have all these people that are very important and integral to the board, but you can be a voice for our clients who live in patient. So I accepted that opportunity and was so honored that he did that. And I have been on the board of directors since. Last year, I was nominated as the vice chair, and this year, I am the chair. This is actually my last year on the board, as there are term limits, but I am honored to be the chairwoman this year. Through Intercommunity, I have done community outreach events on the opioid epidemic. Opioids were my drug of choice before I got sober. So, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I've sat in roundtable discussions and done radio interviews and TV interviews local that, are centered around what can we do as a community, but also as family members who have people who are struggling with addiction. So that's some of the stuff that I've done since I, joined that organization, which is incredible, an incredible organization.
That's amazing. Now, when people finally get into recovery, it's very rarely gradual. There's usually an event that triggers, say, someone saying, okay, this is it. I have to get my life under control. Like, would you mind sharing with our listeners what triggered you to finally go into recovery?
Not at all. So it was June of 2015, and I am originally from Bristol, Connecticut. So I was living in Bristol, but I use the term living loosely. I was living in a tent community of other homeless people in a park there. And I was absolutely miserable. Every day was centered around getting my next fix. I was bathing in fast food bathrooms in the sink because I didn't have access to running water. I was, stealing food to eat from grocery stores. I mean, it was really bad at the end. And I remember I was walking down the street. Route 6 in Bristol is a rather busy road, and I was walking down Route 6 in Bristol to heading back to my tent one night. And I was in a really toxic relationship. We were very toxic to each other because we were both in active addiction. But I was walking down the street to go back to my tent with him. And I remember thinking, when I hear the next car coming, if I just jump in the road, all of this will be over. I won't have to live like this anymore. And that was the moment for me. It wasn't so much that I wanted to end my life, but I didn't really care whether it continued. And so that was the moment, that was my rock bottom. And at that point in time, something caused me to not jump into the road. And I made a call to 211, which in Connecticut is an access line for people who need help with a variety of things. But one of the things that they do is get people into detox facilities. So I was able to go into detox the next day. Now, I had tried to get sober for years prior to this time, but I just kept, it never stuck. But this is the time that it stuck for me. And I ended up in a detox facility the next day.
So, what do you think made that time different? Why did that stick when the previous attempts didn't?
Um, I'm going to be honest with you. Everybody in my life stopped enabling me. My prior attempts, I was being enabled by, I'm an only child, very close to my parents. And I had so many people who were willing to help me, and I believe that they had the best of intentions. But they were keeping me from that true rock bottom. Because I teach that now when somebody, when we are enabling someone, again, we may have the best of intentions, but really what we're doing is sort of putting our hands underneath their bottom and holding them right above their rock bottom. When we remove our hands and we let them fall, that's when that true desperation, which I believe is a gift, can happen. And that is exactly what happened for me that day. I had no one to call. I couldn't call my mom. She had drawn that line in the sand and set that boundary. My dad, everybody that had helped me along the way had kind of said, you know what, we don't want to hear from you anymore. And that I believe that along with a connection with a power greater than me, are the things that made it stick this time.
Yet turning your life over to a power greater than you is a big part of most 12-step programs. Was that something you were introduced to by the program, or did you have a prior religious relationship?
I grew up in a very religious family. Um, my relationship with a higher power at that point was that, and this is not a dig on anybody who has organized religion, because if that works for you and you love it, then I love that for you. And I want everybody to have exactly what they want. For me, the God that I was raised with was judgmental and punishing. And that's okay if that's okay for you, but it caused me to rebel against that God, because I was not living a life that anyone could be proud of. So I just sort of felt like he doesn't want anything to do with me either, but in recovery, I was able to develop a relationship with a power greater than me, that is loving and kind and forgiving. And that is the relationship that I carry today. And people find that relationship with a creator in all sorts of organized religion. And again, if that's your thing, then I love that for you. But for me, I consider myself to be more of a spiritual person than a religious person. I heard once in a 12-step meeting, religion is for people who are afraid of hell, and spirituality is for people who have been there. And that really resonated with me. So that's sort of the way that I think about it.
I love that line. I'm going to steal that.
No, that's just a wonderful analogy. I mean, as people who've been listening to us before, we talk, often about, and I do that in my kindness platform presentations, is basically the source of all creation, whether you want to call it God or anything else, is loving kindness, plain and simple. And it's just a being, and you can call it whatever you want, but that's just a being that's far beyond all of our comprehension. And what the kindness platform is just leading how you respond to life's present moment events, because that's all we have, with loving kindness rather than conflict. And it's all our choice. And obviously, that's all about your life. Some of your podcast topics, which I know you do these for businesses, but they reflect your personal journey, which means so much, I'm sure, to the attendees there that I approach you afterwards that really, when you talk about that, when I talk about my thing, it's just a timeout from life, the way it's perceived for a minute to what it really is all about. And so, I mean, you talk about, I love the title, like humans being, not human doing, restoring balance in a hustle driven world. And that obviously that can cover a whole lot of different things. And then you talk about resilience in real life, moving from challenge to purpose. You relate that to management, but that's everything. I mean, if you just think of those conceptually and contemplate on those without criticizing the person in the mirror, because you got to wake up every single morning and realize that that person in the mirror is just unconditionally loved, created from perfection. And whether you think you deserve it or not, you certainly do. And if you can get that mentality, I tell people I start every morning high-fiving myself like Mel Robbins in the high five habit, saying today, wherever I go, whatever I'm doing, I will be positive. And if you can come up with a gimmick that just trigger in your mind whenever you're feeling down, something that will turn into positivity, I'm sure that was a big part of your recovery efforts too, because it's a choice every single minute, realizing that life goes like that. But all it is just having that awareness. And obviously you present that very, very well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, gratitude is, so important every single day. I my one of my mentors calls it a mantra, right? So like something that I repeat to myself over and over. I remember when in my body of work, I had to work on self-love because I had none. And that looked like affirmations in the mirror every single day. And at first, they made me angry. And then I started to feel, and it made me cry. And then I started to believe it. But it took continued practice of doing that before I could actually believe that I am worthy, that I am loved, that I am, enough. I actually have the words "I am enough" tattooed on my forearm as a reminder, because, we can be our own worst critic, like you said. And, I say it all the time. If anybody else talked to me the way that I talk to me, I would throw hands. Like we would physically fight each other. But that it doesn't have to be that way anymore. And someone else said to me, like, every time I'm being unkind to myself in my head, I think, would I say this to my best friend? My best friend's name is Sarah. So I think, would I say this to Sarah? The answer is absolutely not. I would never say this thing to Sarah. Well, then I need to stop saying it to me.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we will say things to ourselves we would never say to another human. And people in general have a tendency to be harder on themselves than they ever would anybody else. And in terms of recovery, I mean, that's something that's very damaging and it leads people, to places they'd really rather not be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It can.
So, something else you had touched on earlier that we've actually talked about a lot on the podcast. We talk about the equation from Jack Canfield: event plus reaction equals outcome. And you touched on that earlier. When you work with your clients, how do you help them get over that instinct to react without thinking?
Pause is the most important thing in that time. Like, if I don't know what to say, or if what is going to come out of my mouth, if what's up here and could come out, or up here in my head and could come out of my mouth is harmful in any way, I'm going to shut my mouth and take a pause until I know how to respond. There's a difference between react and respond.
Yes.
I,
Yeah, that's actually the quote is event plus response equals outcome.
yeah,
The
exactly.
bottom line is the reactions, there's 60,000 a day up here in your head. And
Yes.
how many times do we make our response, our reaction without pausing? And if you can take that pregnant pause and ask yourself, is it worth it? And again, I talk about leading with kindness rather than conflict. And that includes with the person in the mirror. That's what it's all about. And if all of us could take that pregnant pause between our reaction, which you're never going to stop having negative reactions to things, and responding, And oftentimes, best response is no response whatsoever, just silence. And it's so true. And again, I mean, that's something that everybody out there can understand. And I think what we're talking about today are just aha moments. I don't think we're teaching them anything new. We're just pulling it out of their hearts and their creation and putting it in the foremost of their mind, which is how you start getting better and helping making the world better, just one interaction at a time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and no response is a response, right? I believe that there are two basic human emotions, fear and love. So everything that comes from an angry place or an anxious place, or, when I feel like that hot in the pit of my stomach, like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like this, that's fear, right? Um, so I try to make sure that, for me, and I teach about this as well, the next move that I'm going to make, is it coming from a place of fear or love? And that's what I ask myself when I pause. And, if it's coming from a place of love, or if it feels loving to me, because you can feel it in your body, the difference between fear and love. If it feels like love, then I can go ahead. If it feels like fear, then I'm going to continue to pause until the next thing that comes out of my mouth does come from a place of love.
Nice. Now, one of the things they talk about in most 12-step programs is that you're always in recovery. Yeah, you're never a former addict, you're in recovery. So that indicates that there's always work to be done. So with that in mind, do you have certain habits that you do every day, certain routines? What is your day like dealing with your recovery and assisting other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I am still in a 12-step program. I actually every 6 months I go on retreat with some of the women in my network, and we work all 12 steps in 3 days. But we do this every 6 months. I just got back yesterday from a retreat, so I'm still actively doing that. And that work is so important. We read, we write, we share with each other, and it's basically just a check in over the last 6 months. What has been making your life unmanageable? So that's not really a daily thing, but it is definitely something that I do to maintain my recovery. And I can tell when it's time for retreat, because I start to become like more irritable. I need more pauses when it's time for a retreat, and then when I come back, I'm pretty peaceful for a while, Um, I think that, for me, I believe in the power of physical exercise. So I am a person who tries to get in physical exercise. I go to the gym multiple times a week. That sort of keeps my endorphins up, and it taking care of my physical health plays a huge role in my mental health. So making sure that I am, I meal prep for the week so that I'm not grabbing fast food on the go, because I travel for a living, right? I also, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I say thank you to my creator. And then I say, please help with whatever you think I need help with today, because I have learned about specific prayers. When you pay for patience, you get a lot of opportunities to practice patience, right? So I just say, please help with whatever you think I need help with today. So that keeps me connected to my higher power, which is really, really important for me. I make sure that I talk to other people in recovery throughout the day, because that just keeps me centered. And these people who have done this work as well, I try to surround myself with people that have what I want, or you know who are on the same journey that I'm on. That doesn't mean everybody in my life is that way, but I do definitely try to keep those people around, because it's really, really important to me. And I'm try to stay present, because what I have learned is that when I go into the past, or so if I'm feeling depressed about the past, or if I'm feeling anxious about the future, my higher power doesn't come with me to those places. My higher power is only here with me in the present. And that is where it's the only place that I can find peace. So trying to be mindful of, and it's not easy. There is a mantra that I say for that. And I say, Megan, where are your feet? In my head. My feet are not in yesterday. My feet are not in tomorrow. They are right underneath me today. And when I say that, it's almost like a grounding exercise that brings me back to my present moment when I feel myself going either to the past or the future.
Fantastic. Now, we are just about at the end of our time. So before we wrap up, if our listeners want to get more information, book you for talks, etc., how can they do so?
Absolutely. So you can go to my website. It is www.fiercelymegan.com. And I'm going to spell that. It's FIERCELYMEGHAN.com. You can also find me on social media on Instagram. I am Fiercely Meghan. I am first name, last name on Facebook and on TikTok. But yeah, if the website has a contact form right there. I also did give up my email address in the beginning of the podcast. It is fiercelymegan@gmail.com. You can absolutely reach out to me that way as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway from today?
Well, I think one of the last things we close with is fear and love. And basically, what fear is, the analogy there is false evidence appearing real. And we live in the past and kick ourselves for that. And that's giving up control of ourselves to that. And fearing is giving up control of ourselves to the future when all we have is the present moment. Because every time you're doing that, you're using the present moment to do something negative. So, what is so important to know is that fear, the false evidence appearing real, is just something in your mind. But the reality, as you said, is just going back to love because that's where he came from. That is our source. And that's a message that I hope everybody takes away. Just go to the mirror and love that person in the mirror because that's the way that it really, really is. That's reality. So thanks so much for being here. Congratulations. And I'm sure there's thanks so much from people who have been exposed to you in the past for what you've done. And I can't wait to hear about all the effects you're going to make on a whole lot of people moving ahead. Keep it on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate both of you. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate having you on the podcast. And I think for me, the big takeaway is simply that, yes, you can. You know, you had said before you went into recovery, you didn't care if your life continued. And I mean, that's a dark place to be, but you pulled through. You pulled yourself up, obviously, with the help of the folks in recovery and your support system, but you got through it. And I think that is a powerful message in and of itself that no matter how dark things are, you can move forward, you can improve, and there is always someone, a higher power, if not someone physical in your life, that actually cares about you and wants to see good things for you. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode on at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.